Okay, I think we will now go ahead and begin. This is a wonderful turnout for an important topic, so thank you all for being here. My name is Ed Cole. I am the Executive Director of the Transit Alliance for Middle Tennessee. The Transit Alliance is working with the Metropolitan Transit Authority and with the Mayor's Office and a terrific consulting team that you will hear more from as we go forward in developing an understanding, in developing input for probably the single biggest transit project in Nashville's history, the East-West Connector. Today is the third of 4 early public meetings in this phase of the project, and Jim McAteer from MTA will describe that to you in just a few moments. So your being here today is extremely important in the process. There'll be one final public meeting along the corridor tomorrow at the same time out at West End United Methodist Church, covering the area of Midtown out to the West End Methodist Church side of the street and Vanderbilt and that area. You should have received when you came in comment cards. If not, you can pick them up at the front desk. There'll be a basket, and before you leave, we are very interested in comments of any kind. As we go through today, comments will be recorded in the discussion, but it's also important to have that written record as well. So be sure and pick up comment cards and use them. Let us have them. Also, there's contact information that you have. You'll see in the presentation. You'll see on the handout. And if you would like copies of the PowerPoint that you'll be seeing in just a moment, we can make those available to you as well. Now, the format for today, even though you're comfortably seated right now, that's not going to last very long. Actually, I think you'll find this to be a really helpful format. Our format will be, in a few moments, I will introduce Jim McAteer, who will give an overview of the project using the screen and all of us together. We will then break into 3 groups. This will be very informal. Jim and Doug Tennant, our consultant project, will handle this. But anyway, one group will stay right here. 2 more groups will go out the door. One will be in each of the 2 rooms that you saw marked as you came in. And we'll spend about 20 minutes in each of those 3 locations, which means at the end of 20 minutes, they'll be assigned to the convener, and you'll shift to the next location. So you'll have an opportunity for an up-close conversation, review and conversation about the corridor itself, more detail than we'll have in this opening presentation. We'll have a much fuller discussion about the vehicles, the stations, the technology, and a much fuller conversation about how the whole system will actually work as it's configured and thought about right now, pending the input and the kinds of things that we hear back. So I think you'll find it very comfortable. It will give you a chance to be much closer to the material, and it will also make dialogue much easier as you offer opinions and ask questions. So that will be the approach that we will take, and I hope you find it meaningful, and most important, stay in touch as we move forward with this project that's on a very expedited schedule. Those of us that have been in government for years sometimes wonder if government can act quickly. I think as we watch this project, we're seeing a whole lot of action on a quick scale. So with that, I would like now to introduce to you Jim McAteer. Jim is the Director of Planning for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, and Jim will give us an overview, and then we'll be breaking into the discussion that we're about to have, as I mentioned. Jim.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks everyone for coming out this afternoon. Very much appreciate you stopping by on your lunch hour to learn about a really exciting project that we are hopeful to move forward here in the area. I'm just going to, as Ed mentioned, I'm just going to spend a few minutes kind of giving you a little background data on why exactly we are moving forward with this mass transit initiative and talk a little bit about what we've already done in terms of the project and the previous phases of the study. So to begin, we work closely with the Nashville Area MPO, which does regional planning for the area. And this is a lot of the data we have used in support of the project comes from them. This slide shows development as it was in 1965. So on the left of the slide, you see basically a 10-county area around Davidson County with Nashville in the center, and all of the properties that were affected by development shaded in black. Well, as you move to 2008, as you can see, the intensity is increasing in terms of properties that are affected by development. Well, based on current patterns, projecting into 2035, you have the map on the right. And that's a map that I don't think anyone in this room is going to be excited to be living in this region if that were to happen. So, one of the things that we've been looking at is what to do with the folks that are coming to this region. This chart shows growth in population in the Nashville region, basically from that same time period as on the previous slides. So from 1965 to 2035, the MPO is estimating that we're going to add close to 1 million additional residents to the area. Basically, we see population in 1965, 750,000. In 2035, proposing 2.6 million. The reason this is important is that in 2008, our region had 1.7 million people living here. Now, that's on par with Austin and Charlotte. And in terms of transit and transportation choices beyond just the automobile, they are miles ahead of us. And as we compete nationally with cities that are trying to grow and bring in corporate relocations and things like that, these other cities are our competitors. In 2008, Seattle and Denver were already at the above the 2.6 million range. So in about 20 plus years, we'll be very similar in size to Denver and Seattle as they are today. So how are those million people going to get around? Well, let me ask this question for folks who haven't already seen this. Is this Photoshop or is this real?
That's real for people that have to come in from other counties and distant suburbs, and not for people that travel from the city corridor.
Yeah, that's right. This is a regional corridor that we're showing here. That's right. This is real. It's the Katy Highway in Houston, Texas. It's the widest highway in the world. 26 lanes at some points, actually gets to 28 at a few if you include some of the side lanes. But this is sort of the future. If you want 1 million people to get around, this is what you're going to have to do to accommodate that. Now, if you are focusing on a single occupant vehicle or basically focusing on automobile traffic, the thing that I like to point out with this is that the traffic, which way is the traffic headed, right? The peak time is all showing right, direction is showing there with all the cars still lining up. So really, it just kind of proves the concept that you can't build your way out of congestion. And that's why I call this version 1.0. Now, another aspect of growth in our region is congestion that occurs on a daily basis, not due to accidents or anything of that nature. Today, the roads that are highlighted in the left map in red are congested based on just capacity issues. There's too many cars to fit on the roadway. Well, the MPO has projected in 2035 it's going to look like the map on the right. And that is after the MPO has built all of the projects that they have proposed in the 2035 plan. And if you're aware, that's a list of many, many, many roadway and highway projects. So the reality is we can't build our way out of congestion. So what I offer is a solution that looks at taking 40 cars out of the road and putting them into a smaller footprint. This graphic just basically shows you on the left how much space 40 cars takes up. On the right, how much space 40 people take up in a bus. And as you can see, it's much more efficient to move 40 people in a vehicle on our roadways than it would in our bus than it would be in a single occupant vehicle. So now here's where we get to how will they get around version 2.0. And this is what's called Bus Rapid Transit, and it's a system in Cleveland, and it is a fantastic system, which we'll have some more photos talking about. It's spurred economic development. It's basically a subway on wheels. So stepping back now and talking briefly about our project and the earlier phases, just kind of want to bring you up to speed. If you participated in the first phase of the project, which was a year long, roughly from January to January, ending this last December or so, we determined what's the best mode for this corridor. So would it be buses? Would it be BRT? Would it be streetcar? And where we ended up was determining BRT is the best mode. Some key elements of this corridor is that really this is our main street for the region, right? So we have all of our, we have 170,000 jobs on this corridor. We have 25,000 residents on this corridor. We have 11 million visitors annually to Nashville that all travel to destinations along this corridor. We have the Vanderbilt Stadium, we've got the downtown arena, we've got the Ryman. I mean, pretty much everything that we have in Nashville is on this main street. We've got LP Field on the East Nashville side. So in this first phase, we determined the preliminary routing and stations, which effectively went out to White Bridge Road and then came in on Broadway and West End. And when you get into town, we hadn't yet determined in that first phase of the process which roadways we should be recommending. So on this map shown in green were some of the alternate routes that we were looking at, which was to have a leg that potentially would divert onto Demumbrian, and we were still looking at how best to get across the river to serve the East Nashville folks. What I would say today, and we'll be talking about when we get to the sessions, is working with the URS team, we are now making a recommendation on exactly the routing that we're proposing to you all and for your comments. Another thing that obviously we were looking at first phase was determining the mode, and we compared this with light rail, with bus rapid transit, and with streetcar. Those are really the ones that make the most sense in this corridor. I'm not going to go through every single number on this slide. Suffice it to say that basically BRT has almost identical ridership that streetcar has at really half the cost. And I would also argue that the future of transit across the country is going to be bus rapid transit. It's not going to be streetcar. The reason for that is you get the bang for the buck that you get from your transportation perspective is the dedicated lanes. If you dedicate a lane to a bus or a streetcar, it doesn't make a difference. It's going to make it faster. Well, as bus technology improves and we move towards electric buses, I think that all the advantages of streetcar will basically go away. But that being said, the cost of the project was estimated at roughly 136 to 150 million, and that's kind of where we're refining those numbers, and as we go through this second phase. As I mentioned, and you'll see in a little more detail as we get into the breakout sessions, this is not the bus that you traditionally think about. This is really a rail vehicle on wheels. And these are some photos from systems across the world, internationally as well as local or in the US, of some of the vehicles that are out there. This is in Las Vegas. And these are really dramatic, exciting vehicles with wide doors and all the amenities that you might find on a rail type system. I do want to show you an example of what bus rapid transit could look like on West End, and this is just an example. It's not a proposal at this point, but it shows median running buses, and it shows buses on the sides of the roads as well. And when you get to the breakout sessions, we'll discuss more about where those might be located. So what's running right now is an example of the bus running in a median way. And that's what we're proposing for a majority of the project. And then some portions where the bus could run in dedicated lanes on the sides of the roads as well. Okay, so now we get to the good stuff where you really get to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, get into the breakout sessions and learn more about the project. We have 3 stations, as Ed mentioned, and I'll go through each of those real quickly. We're going to talk about station number 1, which will be in this room. We'll be talking about, where is the routing, what's kind of the logic behind the routing, how are the stations going to operate, how will the buses or the rapid transit vehicles get through downtown. At station number 2, which is in the next room, that is going to be talking about the system and how it actually works. So Doug Tennant from URS will be going over that. We're looking at making this project something that has a positive impact on the corridor. In fact, it'll have a great economic benefit for the corridor with fast and frequent service and improvements to the streetscaping, so the sidewalks and trees. And then the third station will be talking about kind of the user experience. What would it be like for you to ride this system, and what could you expect to see? So we're talking about the station design, how that's going to look. These aren't just bus stops on the side of the road. These are iconic stations. We will be having, this is our 3rd meeting, as Ed mentioned, and we'll have another one tomorrow. And then in August, after we've gathered all your feedback, we'll be coming back to the public for another round of community meetings, probably towards the end of August, to take your feedback, fold it into the proposal, and let you know what we believe would be the best project. I also wanted to follow up on Ed's comments about making or having input. We do have a website on the project. We do have Twitter. You can kind of do all those social media things. So we'll go ahead and leave this on the screen. And well, I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and break into groups. The corridor and what we're proposing in terms of the actual routing of this service, it would start out at basically White Bridge Road, or really the first station would be at Woodlawn. So we're looking to establish a park and ride lot where folks from the community as well as a little bit further out could drive in, park their cars, and hop on this dedicated route system. The second station we're proposing would be at Cherokee Road, which would kind of provide an access point to Sylvan Park as well as sort of the Richland West End community and neighborhood. The third station we're looking at is at Bowling, and we have been talking about a potential park and ride at Elmington Park as well. There has been some concern over what the impact that would have on the park, and obviously we'll be looking at that as we go through this process. The fourth station will be at 31st. And I will tell you that kind of as we've been moving through this project, there were more stations proposed in some of the initial maps that we had. But in looking at all of the traffic that travels to the interstate here, kind of over from Vanderbilt, we realized that trying to squeeze some dedicated lanes and a bus rapid transit vehicle in there, or two stations, would be difficult. So that's why at this time we're only proposing one station right there at 31st. The great thing about this station, however, is that when the bridge gets completed that goes over the railroad tracks over to Charlotte, the 28th Street connector, MTA is going to be providing some connecting crosstown service. And we know at MTA that there's a strong need for crosstown service. So this will be an opportunity for folks to ride the system and then transfer and get across town as well. Or folks to come in, transfer to this, and go downtown too. So we're real excited about that. The next station we're looking at is at 26th, which we consider to be on the western side of the Vanderbilt campus. It's also where Centennial Park is and all the regional events happen. So you could take the bus to the Arts Festival or the TACA events or any of those types of things, or games at the Vanderbilt Stadium. On the other side of the campus, basically at 21st, is where we're proposing another station as well. On the east side of the campus, this we feel would be the access point for a lot of the hotel workers or folks at Vanderbilt that would be getting to the hospital areas. And as someone pointed out at one of our previous sessions, this really is key to the Baptist Hospital area as well. So that station really will be able to feed all of the businesses and all of the jobs that are in that area. A couple things I do want to mention before I continue. The pink dots on here, sort of the bullseye ones, are the stations. If you come up here and look at it later, the little red dots on here are basically just signalized intersections. So that's all those are. And then this dashed line around the edge is a half-mile buffer. So from this station to the edge is half mile. So it's 1 mile on either total, but a half mile either way. And that's really kind of the walking distance that folks will go. A quarter mile is a guarantee. You'll get someone to walk a quarter mile easily. A half mile is kind of what we experience here in Nashville because we're so spread out. Okay, so that being said, then we go down to station number 7, which is 17th Avenue, and that's really sort of the heart of Midtown. We expect there's a lot of opportunity for redevelopment in that area, and a lot of the opportunities for redevelopment may not exactly be on West End, but will actually have impacts on Church and on parallel streets as well. Coming further into the city, station number 8, we are proposing at 12th Avenue, and this is kind of our Gulch access point. One of the reasons we decided, or one of the proposals, the reason that we're not deciding to recommend going down Demonbreun is that does get you a little bit closer to the Gulch as it's configured today, but the Gulch is growing and there's development happening all along there, so this may be the center in the future. In addition, you would potentially have a time delay to your passengers. If you're getting on out here at 31st and trying to get downtown, well, now we're adding some time to that trip by doing that little jog. And the reality is that the folks that are in the Gulch now are kind of Gen Ys and folks that are real urban. An extra block is not going to be a deal breaker for them. Moving across the interstate and the train, basically the next stop would be at 8th Avenue, and we've been having some comments from folks at other sessions that they think we should be looking at 9th or somewhere else in there. So we'll be looking at that, but that's what we're proposing right now. The next station then would be at 10th. At 5th, that's station number 10. And that's kind of like, the entryway to the downtown Broadway. That's where the hill ends and it gets flat, and that's really sort of the downtown the area. From there, we propose that the busway go to 3rd, where it would make a left and go up 3rd, which I'll switch over to this map. to show you how it would go through downtown. We are proposing 2 lanes throughout the corridor, and I'll talk about that at the station designs, that are dedicated to transit. On 3rd Avenue, they would switch over to the sidewalk side, basically. And so we'd have a station at Church on either side of the sidewalk, and this would be converted really to a bus primary street. So we would include some of our MTA regular service buses would be taken off of 4th and 5th, which is what we use now to access our Music City Central transfer facility, and put a bunch of those in here as well. And then the center lane would be used for automobile traffic to access all the parking facilities that are out there now. And there are a lot of parking garages and surface lot parking. So that would have to be a one-way street, obviously. And so we're looking at this point of proposing that the street go northbound. From there, the bus would turn into one single lane on Union, make a left onto Union, and then a right onto 5th and a right onto Charlotte. So the yellow lines are where we're talking about having dedicated lanes. Then it would go into mixed traffic. So from Charlotte, we would have a station across from Music City Central. We would not be pulling into our transfer facility. We would build a station right there on the street where folks could basically come in from the region. So if you're riding a Gallatin bus or a Hendersonville bus or Clarksville bus, you could come in, get off here, and then just cross the street and be able to get to the 170,000 jobs that are on that corridor. It would go in mixed traffic, basically get in the left lane. So the gray on the map is where is mixed traffic. From there, we could potentially put in what's called a queue jump. So if the bus got stopped at the light here at Union, it would turn green for the bus maybe 8 seconds before it does for the traffic. And that would allow the bus to kind of get a head start on the bridge. And since there's no turning movements off of the bridge, thankfully, it's pretty much a straight shot, and the bus will be able to get across there very quickly. Once it gets to the other side, it would then re-enter into bus-only lanes. And then we would look to have a station at LP Field, or really the Juvenile Justice Center, and we could serve all of the events there. It would head down to 5th Avenue or 5th Street. We'd make a left and then a very quick right onto Main, at which point we'd have 3 stations proposed, kind of at 6th, roughly 8th or 9th, and then again at 10th. And we are proposing a park and ride at the East High, and have been talking with Metro Schools about doing that. So the end of the line, the bus may actually come off of Main, pull into a park and ride lot to kind of make its turnaround, and then that's where it would come back out and come back in. One thing I forgot to mention was a station also at Riverfront. So potentially we could have one single lane that would basically go down to where the Court of Flags sort of used to be, where that little circle is. And this would do a couple things. For big events, July fireworks, anything like that, we could have a number of buses queued up and ready to go to just get people out of there. The other thing is for the train riders that are coming in on the Music City Star train, they could basically hop off the train and do a short walk and get on this, and then again, get to those 170,000 jobs that are out on that corridor. Right now, we already have a bus that meets those passengers, and it's full as it heads out. So that's basically the routing. Let me then talk a little bit about how the stations will be designed, and then we'll have time for your comments and questions. We are looking for a majority of the corridor to have stations that are in the middle of the roadway that are one single station. So the way this would operate is you'd have one bus lane in each direction, and the buses would have to have doors on both sides. So when we talk about these being rail-like vehicles, it would be just like a subway vehicle that you get on and the doors are on both sides. That's necessary to provide the boarding when you have a platform in the middle of the road. With this design, there are a lot of advantages to it in that we are able to get 2 lanes through the intersections, and that helps us keep the bus traffic or the bus service flowing and on time, and doesn't have as much of an impact on the traffic as well. And I'll talk about that, the alternative to that in just a second. But the flip side of that is that we would be adding stoplights at all of these stations for pedestrians to get across. So we'd have a new stoplight here just for the pedestrians. Now, the reason this doesn't break the traffic flow is because this signal would be tied with this signal. So when this one goes red, this one would go red, and it would allow passengers to get back and forth. And I would tell you that we had some serious consternation when our consultant team said, well, we want to add a bunch of signals to get the pedestrians across. But we do need to have those signals to do that safely. So moving over to a single station design, as I may have mentioned in the earlier presentation, I don't know that I did. We did challenge our team to stay within the right-of-way. So we don't want to be, purchasing a lot of property as a result of this project. So with that being said, in some cases where the right-of-way is fairly narrow, they came up with a really rail-like solution. And that is that the 2 lanes could narrow down to 1 at some station areas where there's a tight constraint. And the bus would basically, in this case, it's like a rail signal. So if a bus were coming from the west towards downtown, this is the 21st area, it would stop at a stop bar. This bus would come through the intersection, load and unload, go on, and then this bus would be cleared to go through and load and unload on the opposite side. 10 minutes? Okay, great, thank you. So that's a really unique design, and it can work, and we'll probably end up having to use a few of these throughout the corridor. But the issue with that is this can have an impact on the service that we provide through the bus system or the BRT system by having those buses meet. So whenever a bus has to now stop and wait for another bus to clear and load and unload, that could potentially cause some delay. And as we add more buses into the system as the ridership grows, you're going to have more of those potential meets. So that's why we really pushed hard for the consultant team to find as many places as they could to fit in these dual lanes that run through the intersection, and then it just requires that we buy a different type of bus with doors on both sides. So that being said, that's in a real quick kind of high-level overview of the proposed routing and the stations and how some of that will work. I will mention that in order to keep these lanes free of automobiles, they will have some kind of demarcation that shows that this is a bus-only lane. In addition, down the center of the roadway, there will be some type of barrier that would prevent automobiles from making left turns across that lane, because if we had a car pull in there and basically stop because it's waiting for traffic to go the other way, that really mess up the system. And for it to be a BRT on rubber tires, that can't happen. So to address that, and you'll learn more about this from the other session as well, they have talked about allowing legal U-turns. So if you were trying to turn into the Lowe's Vanderbilt or somewhere across here, you would just go down to the light and then have a time to make that U-turn and get around. And then that way it's a right turn in. And actually, as we've been reviewing this and looking at cities across the country and really internationally as well, that is something that a lot of cities don't even allow left turns on their major arteries because it really has the chance to mess up the movement of the traffic through there.
If the funding doesn't go through, is there any idea how far back that would push the project if we don't get the funding?
Well, it would push it very, very, very far back. The question was, if we don't get the federal funding, what's going to happen? And my sense is we'll then try again to get the federal funding. So we're going to, do everything we can to make that project as competitive as possible.
Are you telling me that this is all going to be federally funded and no local money involved in this?
No, not at all. The Small Starts, that's a good question. The Small Starts program, to be competitive, basically they'll pay for up to 50% of the capital cost for the project, and at a maximum of $75 million. So if you had a $150 million project, they would potentially pay up to $75 million. Now some cities, as they do these projects across the country, and Chicago is looking at planning lots of BRTs. New York already has one. They'll actually maybe overmatch is what it's called, so the locals might kick in 60%. We'll be looking for a 50% match from the federal government.
My concern is primarily with Lower Broadway downtown. Right now, our pedestrian traffic is pretty much at capacity. With the opening of the new convention center, obviously that pedestrian traffic is going to increase. Right now, the policy is to shut down streets for events at the Bridgestone Arena or elsewhere for over 10,000 people. How do you plan to navigate that with the bus rapid transit line when those big events are going on and those streets are shut down? And how do we plan to accommodate increased pedestrian traffic downtown with its growth?
That's a great question. And the question relates to, the pedestrian travel downtown and, kind of we're at capacity from a pedestrian standpoint. We actually went downtown just this last Thursday to kind of observe. It wasn't one of those 10,000, people days where they shut down the streets, but we kind of got a sense of when the Ryman was letting out. And the arena, Bridgestone, thanks. Anyway, so what we found, and actually other cities have been very successful at this, is transit fits in very well with the pedestrian environment. It is a pedestrian system, right? On either end of the trip, you're a pedestrian. And so we're looking to engage our consultant team to potentially look at the complete streets aspect of it, as the mayor's complete street proposal, to look at what amenities could occur along the corridor at key station locations to improve the pedestrian environment. So potentially, where we could provide, wider sidewalks or streetscaping, all those kind of things. And in the downtown area, we feel pretty strongly that this could be operated successfully. I mean, you could close the streets off to automobiles and folks could still kind of walk out in the roadways they do now, and the buses could squeeze through in the middle. It's really, because they're not, I mean, these buses, when they're downtown, they're context sensitive. It's like a streetcar. It's not going to be going 30 miles an hour through downtown. It's just going to go slow and load people up and get through. So that's kind of where we're leaning, and we are, talking to folks in the downtown area about, how that might best work. Yes, ma'am.
In the years that it'll take to do this, there'll be other things that have to happen under the streets, like sewer and all the other water things that happen under pavement, like on West End. Is there a way to coordinate so that if you're going to open up the street to put in a station that whatever water stuff has to be done can happen at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that on our sort of broader, stakeholder group, NES is on there, Water's on there. We've already been working with Public Works. So we at this phase of the project are kind of taking, if you think of this project as a funnel going down to like a refined, defined project at the end, we started at the wide end and we came up with those kind of ridership and estimates. And now we're at the second phase where we're narrowing that down and we're getting a little bit more detail. So through this project, we'll do preliminary engineering and we'll start to get some of that information. Where are the utilities? What's coming up? And then when we get to the third phase, that's when we really kind of dig into it all and decide, okay, what projects can we coordinate and get done all at the same time?
Great.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
More of a comment. I'm actually from Cleveland. I've seen
Great.
the Cleveland system. It's phenomenal, and I can't believe the change it's made from the University Circle to the downtown area.
Yeah.
It's great.
Thank you, appreciate it. Well, it is kind of the gold standard in the United States, that system. It's, if you get an opportunity to go to Cleveland, I would definitely check it out. The paper up there has actually estimated $4 billion worth of economic development as a result of that project, or in conjunction with that project. The transit system only estimated about $1.9 billion, but the city actually did a little bit more broader and in-depth review. And so these projects can definitely have a positive impact on a community and the city. I'm going to try to get a question from everybody and then, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Sure.
I guess my question is, if this proposed gets put in and works, is your plan to kind of do the same thing on the existing one on Gallatin Road, or?
The question is whether we would kind of translate this over to Gallatin Road. I don't know that would be initially the plan. That service is what we call BRT Lite, and we're in the process of kind of rebranding that. Which it does a lot of similar things. It only has 14 stations. It's a 12-mile corridor. We have transit signal priority, which means that if the bus gets behind schedule, it has the ability to talk to the intersections and extend the green lights to kind of help the bus catch up on schedule, those kind of things, which we'd also have on here. We are looking to expand that onto many more corridors, and I would say once this proves to be successful, our expectation would be that there will be many other areas of the city that are crying out for this type of investment. So then we probably do some type of planning related specifically to that.
To follow up on that, Jim, you see the migration of the program to be BRT Lite to more corridors before you would tackle a second corridor with the full-blown BRT?
Correct, and actually we're getting ready to do a BRT Lite on Murfreesboro Road next year. So yes, we're definitely, because it's the dedicated roadway obviously is what really is what makes the service so much higher level of service, but that's also really challenging on our constrained corridors as they are. But Gallatin was our highest ridership route. It went from 80,000 trips a month to over 120. Right now it's in the 120,000 trips a month range. And we expect to kind of move that onto Murfreesboro, which is our next highest ridership route.
Yeah, I've done the BRT for rapid transit, and I like it. It's good. I'm not necessarily sold on dedicated lanes, because I just don't think I think you're going to cause problems with the flow of traffic, and I have some problems with left turns and just convenience aspects. One thing that I do have a problem with is what you talked about, development and transit-oriented development. I think when we're looking at mass transit, we should focus on getting people from point A to point B and not focus on, well, this is going to enhance development or do that. That's not what most people who ride the buses care about. They care about get me from point A to point B in a fairly reasonable time.
Right.
And going out and saying, well, if we do this, then we'll have more business or more high rises or whatever else. I don't think that sells me.
Well, and I appreciate that very much. And we're not trying to sell you on that specifically, but the advantage is one of the challenges that we face at MTA is that as a city, we are really spread out. And to make transit efficient, you want as many people on those buses as you possibly can get. And the more spread out we are, the harder it is to serve those efficiently. So by putting in a corridor, making a major investment in the city, taking confidence in ourselves to do that, you will drive development to those areas, and then you might decide that you want to get an apartment or buy a house on that corridor. And now, the development starts to get more concentrated and focused, and then it's easier to serve much more efficiently. It's also easier from a utility standpoint as well.
Thanks for coming to our station here. And I'm Bob Murphy with RPM Transportation Consultants. We are the traffic engineers for the project, and I'm going to turn it over to Doug Tennant, who is with URS, and they are the main consultant on the
Great. Thanks, Bob. So, again, my name's Doug Tennant. I'm a senior planner with URS Corporation here in Nashville. We're the lead consultant, and I'm the project manager for the proposed East-West Connector. And I appreciate you all coming out this morning, early afternoon. What our session is about, you all came from Station 1, right? So generally it starts out at White Bridge Road and the system runs over to East Nashville. What we want to talk to you about is how that actually works. How does this system work along West End, Broadway, and Main Street? Where's the BRT lanes go? What about traffic? And what I would preface the whole discussion is this idea, this concept, is the idea that transit and traffic and vehicles, there's a balance that we're trying to achieve there. And right now out on Broadway, West End, kind of traffic and vehicles are way up here on that scale, and transit and pedestrians are down here. And what this project seeks to do, because growth is coming, what we need to do is start trying to pull that balance a little bit like this, so that vehicles still work on West End. We do not want to break West End. This project is not about making traffic on West End become gridlock. What we want to do is introduce a new mode of transportation along West End to pull that into balance so that West End, Broadway, Main Street can grow into the future. Without a million more people in this region, this corridor being what it is, kind of our Main Street, a lot of those people are going to want to live along this corridor. And how many more cars can West End and Broadway and Main Street take? So, how do we do that? Well, Bus Rapid Transit works. It creates fast and frequent service a number of ways. First off, we're going to run vehicles every 10 minutes. So if you walk to a station and you're waiting on a vehicle, you will not wait longer than 10 minutes. And in fact, the ridership numbers may say that that number actually goes down. So it'll be fast and it'll be frequent. And it'll run all day and into the early evenings. And I would tell you, these are baseline projections. If ridership is there, MTA and the city want to provide a vehicle to get people on. Our goal is to have as many vehicles running in this corridor as possible to move people along the corridor. So fast, frequent service. The way that it becomes fast is the ability to add 2 dedicated BRT lanes, where those lanes are only for transit vehicles, okay? And they would be 2 lanes, 1 inbound, 1 outbound. But that balance, so now this balance starts to get a little bit like this, okay? But to make sure that balance stays in place, we are having 2 through lanes inbound on West End and 2 through lanes outbound on West End. And because this, and I'm going to let Bob talk a little bit here, because the transit way, we don't want cars to get into it. What we're going to do is restrict movements across that transit way. So we don't want people turning left across that transit way and blocking it. Because a bus that isn't on time, a transit vehicle that isn't on time, is an empty bus. And it has to be on time. So what we're doing is making these through lanes to move that traffic up and down the way. And because we're going to restrict those left turn movements, we're going to add depth and add at all the traffic lights a longer left turn storage length, so that if you wanted to go from here to, this is Vanderbilt Plaza, you would get in this left lane and we would have a new legal U-turn signal to where you would do that and pull in the lane. So there'll actually be a signal that'll say at 21st Avenue, because it's one way, it would not say turn left, it'd actually tell you to do a U-turn. And you'll have a green U-turn signal that allows you to do that in a protected fashion. Bob, you might take it from there.
Yeah, right. And at every signalized intersection, you will be able to make a left turn or a U-turn. We're doing traffic analysis to identify how much left turn storage we need to accommodate the left turns and the U-turns, and then also what that does in terms of signal timing. What is the amount of green time required on that to do that? Now, one point I would make as far as maintaining the two BRT lanes is that will require the removal of on-street parking on West End so that we can maintain those two through lanes. I think you may have come from a station that had the concept that showed the stations that were mid-block. This concept is another option that shows the stations at the intersections. We'll probably go with, if we can, with more concepts and more locations with the mid-block stations because that enables us to maintain these two BRT lanes through the intersections. But I would point out that regardless of whether the station is at the intersection or the mid-block, the pedestrian crossings there'll be pedestrian signals for the crossings as well as crosswalks, so that pedestrians can get to those can get to the median safely.
Let me couple more things, and then we'll open it up to questions. I think Bob talked about pedestrian movements. I think to the city's credit, they also want to take transit, land use, and streetscaping, pedestrian movements, and put them together and start planning them together because they all work together. Land use can be intensified and new development patterns can occur because of transit, but transit occurs because people feel comfortable walking to those stations. So in this proposal, the city and MTA are talking about a streetscaping program that transforms West End and Broadway and allows that pedestrian walkable environment to be enhanced greatly. Because again, if Bob and I want to do the transit, but we got to take our lives into our hands trying to get to it along West End, guess what? We're going to do it once and then we're not going to do it again. So a significant effort will be taken to transform the corridor to make it more walkable, make it more pedestrian friendly, even to the degree that if you can imagine that being West End, Broadway, these side streets that might go to big anchor employers or like a Vanderbilt or an HCA, we may improve streetscapes back into what I call those finger streets so that we can pull those riders out of those areas into the system. Finally, I think fast frequent service, how it'll work, really it all comes down to, is it going to be more convenient for me? Is it going to work for me? And what's the benefit to me? And I think the easiest way to describe that, if Bob and I are out at St. Thomas Hospital, the end of the line on the West End, and Bob says, let's go to lunch over here in East Nashville. And I said, okay, Bob, and I got a meeting afterwards, Bob, so I need to take my car. If Bob gets on the BRT the way it's proposed right now, and I get in my car and we start at the same time, Bob will get in East Nashville 25% faster than I will. Because that vehicle, one, has a dedicated lane, 2, has the ability to prioritize the signal and make it through the signal. Now, that doesn't mean the vehicle can be a mile away and it keeps that signal green. We're not going to break West End. We're not going to let the traffic suffer at the expense of transit. But there are a variety of methods that Bob's BRT vehicle allows him to progress through the corridor where me and my car are going to be sitting and watching Bob zoom on by. That's where the proof in the pudding is. Is it convenient? Is it fast? Is it something that allows me to have more freedom to do different things in this corridor? So with that, let me open it up to questions or comments and go from there.
I'm interested in feeder lines as to when the buses, how the buses can feed in and then make the transit to Midtown or Baptist Hospital or Vanderbilt.
Right.
You mentioned a couple at the intro about park and ride in some fairly congested areas already, you know, Belmead area. What thoughts do you have about feeder lines into the BRT?
And that's a good, his question was about what about feeder lines, feeder bus routes, and that's a great question. It allows me to tell you this. One is we are planning and designing this system, but in the midst of all that, we suggested to MTA you can't just view this in its own little shell. So we are looking at all those feeder routes and starting to look at all of MTA's routes and figure out how they would work with this. I should have said, I don't have all the answers today. I don't have that answer, but I would tell you we're addressing that issue, is how to get feeder routes to this system and get them on the system, but also how to connect back to those major generators and allow people to walk to the system. Good question. Don't have the answer, but I promise you we are looking into those answers.
And MTA has been looking at that too. And for instance, they have a route that they're going to implement when the 28th and 31st connectors project is complete. They call it the University Connectors, that will connect the north side of Charlotte down to Vanderbilt and Belmont and those areas, and that'll cross, this BRT line there at West End and 31st.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
About what kind of time estimate would you figure for going from, let's say, White Bridge to, let's say, 9th Street or 10th Street, top of the hill?
Well, I think that depends on what time of day. But what do we run? Your model ran in the...
we're in the early stages of evaluating that, so we don't have, I don't have all the specific information, but just kind of as an example, during morning peak times, rush hour, the travel times that our preliminary travel times that we're coming up with from White Bridge Road to basically downtown where the Music City Center is about 24 minutes. So it's pretty fast.
Yeah. And again, the key there is that the BRT vehicle, again, you can imagine the BRT vehicle being in its own lane. It starts out and gets ahead of you, and then maybe the cars catch up. But once that vehicle can turn that light green, and this car is 10 cars back from that green light, he's stuck at the red light, and that vehicle keeps going. So that's where those travel time savings happen. Yes, sir.
The kind of buses that work in a system like this, they also have bike racks like the BRT on Gallatin, or they have a different system for bikes?
We're looking at, the question was, what about bike racks on the vehicles? We're looking at two options there, and again, another great question that we don't have the answers for yet, but we're looking at two options. One option would actually have a rack inside the vehicle, and we like that option, and I think MTA likes that option. Otherwise, there will absolutely be the opportunity to store or transport your bicycle in this system.
What some other systems do, if they don't have the internal bike rack, is they just have a place that where you can store your bike, and that just takes out seats. They remove the seats and have that area.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't understand. How do you allow, are there going to be limited intersections where you can turn left or to make the U-turn? And if those then, what traffic only runs in one direction at a time? Is that?
Good question. His question was, explain in more detail about how at intersections you can turn left and make U-turns. Bob, I'll let you take that.
I think first of all, it will be restricted to the signalized intersections. So, you know, the intersections that are signalized now along West End and Broadway, they will continue to be signalized the same way with Main Street. But say, for instance, you know, you were going to turn left into this driveway. Instead of turning at this point, what you would do is come down to this and get in this left turn lane. This is a left turn lane right here. And when the traffic signal comes on for the left turn signal, you would be able to make a U-turn and then turn in there. Now, on the other hand, you know, if you're familiar with where you're going, you know, and if you know this area, you know that you actually can turn at the previous intersection and come in. So I think what you're going to find is different people are going to find their way, you know, to the location depending on how well they know the system. So they won't necessarily have to make a U-turn, but if they're unfamiliar with the area, then they can pass by where their destination is and make the U-turn.
So for me, it will become a part of a routine. I mean, we know that we can't snap our fingers and everybody will figure out on the first day how to do this, but things have changed in this corridor. I've been here 25 years. A lot has changed. And so everybody kind of learns the routine, how to get the best way that they need to go. And this will be a change, but I think again, that balance, when we introduce transit, what we want to do is introduce enough traffic improvements at the signalized intersections. Because I don't know about you all, but on yesterday afternoon, I was trying to make a left across West End Avenue, and that's a pretty hard thing to do. I mean, it takes you a while, and then even then, you kind of close your eyes and hope for the best and go. What we want to do is limit those movements and get those at signalized intersections, give you a signal that protects you to make that left turn or that U-turn. And we think if you do that and keep traffic moving on West End, in the long run, that balance starts to allow us to move more people, more goods, more everything in West End, Broadway. Yes, sir.
Will there be parts where there's a curb between regular traffic and the bus traffic?
Good question.
Yes. There will be a curb that separates the BRT lanes so that traffic cannot turn across. We're still evaluating whether there will be also a curb between the travel lanes for vehicles and the BRT lanes. One of the big issues there is, do we have enough width? Because, you know, if we put in a 8-inch to 12-inch curb, then that's, you know, we've got to make sure we have enough width for all the different lanes we have. So we are still evaluating that, but at the very least, there'll be a barrier between the BRT lanes.
And where we've done this in other places, we have done, you know, like a rumble strip on the side of a highway. We're not saying it'll be that, but we could do something as simple as that, where if you were veering into that lane, you'd start running over something and make sure, you know that you're going somewhere you shouldn't be, and so you'd pull out. Anything else? Well, we're excited about this opportunity. I think it's something that Nashville needs to contemplate and something that Nashville will need. I think for guys my age, you know, it's something that's kind of a little bit changing, but I would tell you, my wife's a professor in college, and she has a bunch of students that are going to live in Nashville. They don't want to own a car. They don't want to pay insurance. They don't want to pay a car note. They want to live in the Gulch and be able to use transit to get where they want to go. They want to live out at 31st and West End and go downtown and do it with mass transit. This is a game changer for Nashville because I believe the younger generations, the Gen X, the Gen Ys, and the millennial, those folks don't want those costs. They want the freedom to get where they want to get along this corridor, because this corridor will have everything they want to live, work, and play. So that's really what we're trying to do. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true that aging boomers are going to want that too, and do want that?
Yes, that's something I think is very important.
He's one of those, he knows.
I'm getting around that age too.
No,
but,
you're right.
You know, I mean, we really want to be able to, and particularly as we age, we don't want to have to rely on a car. And we might get to the point where we can't drive a car. We still want to be able to get around. So it's very important that we have options. And even if we do have a car, you know, we may not feel like driving all the time, or maybe we have more difficulty driving at night. So it'd be nice to have that as an option.
Sure.
That's a great point.
Great point. It's not just for the young people, but and again, great transit goes across all demographics, all socioeconomic levels in our experience. Yes, sir.
Is there any way to integrate bike lanes while we're changing this corridor so greatly, or is it wiser just to, you know, create bike lanes on other corridors, or has there been any analysis on that?
We are, in fact. The question was, what about bike lanes? You said it much more eloquently. I'll cut it to the chase there. We are looking at bike lanes on this corridor, but again, we're balancing transit and traffic and trying to make it multimodal. We're running out of space. And so our goal is to not create a bike lane that's unsafe and no one will ever use. So I think we're still going to try to look at what options there are here to maybe do, not bike lanes on sidewalks, but is there anything kind of outside the curb lane, moving the curb lane to get more space for the bike lines through the streetscape? But I think ultimately it'll probably come down to what you said, which is let West End be that transit traffic corridor and look at parallel relievers for bike lanes and create a grid network that you can do it on in that regard. I think is that being the summons? Well, thank you all for being here. I think your next station is out the door and to the left.
The purpose of this session is to talk about the experience of the passenger, the customer, the rider, the user, however you'd like to describe that person. And the two main features of that experience that we can spend some time talking about are the vehicles themselves and the stations, because those are the two elements beyond the corridor, which you've already had some conversation about, that can make this an experience that's attractive. The vehicles themselves, as you've heard multiple times, are rubber-tired subway, light rail, trolley-type vehicles. Rubber-tired meaning they operate in dedicated lanes on pavement as opposed to operating on tracks. But from that point on, the similarity to a bus begins to disappear. One of the most important features is they're designed with wide opening doors at level entrances off of platforms at permanent stations. So the doors open and people get off and people come on. Some of us in Eugene had a chance to ride on the MX system, this one right here, and we found it could stop, unload, load, and be out in less than a minute. And that's why the system becomes very efficient and attractive, because of the frequency that is allowed by not spending a lot of time waiting in the station with other vehicles backing up. Propulsion, the current state of the art obviously is probably where we are right now, which is diesel-electric hybrids. Cleaner, quieter than current diesel technology. We're probably just very close to the next generation of all-electric transit vehicles because of the recharge capability, the fast recharge capability at an individual station, but we're not there yet. But I think keep electric in mind, but certainly the hybrid is extremely important. On board, part of that off and on boarding is an area for big things, bikes, luggage, walkers, wheelchair if you don't need the wheelchair while you're seated in a seat on the coach itself. MTA has done a terrific job in making bikes possible on our MTA system by mounting them on racks in front. But if you stop and think about it, number one, you're going to be in a dedicated guideway. Do you want to step around in front of this bus looking like this, trying to hang a bike on it? Number two, that takes time. And so Portland and cities that have far more bikes per passenger than we do have found this. And if you've ever been where they do this, you'll see it's very efficient. You just roll your bike up, hook it over a rack and go, and get off the same way. And that is also true with large parcels, with baby strollers. just the kinds of things that simply are almost impossible to move off and on a bus where you're having to navigate steps and you got people behind you saying, move on, move on, move on. Interior, just think state of the art. We had a great question just asked us, will this be, Jeff Yarborough, if you know, is on the MTA board. First time we've heard the question, will you be able to open the windows on a nice day? As opposed to always being captive in an enclosed, air-conditioned, heated environment. And the comment was somebody who was familiar with the St. Charles streetcar in New Orleans, and part of that experience is, and there are days down there when you don't want the windows open. But anyway, we're going to look at it. But the experience inside will be the best that I think you could imagine on any vehicle of a rail or a non-rail type. And clearly MTA is looking at wireless and those kinds of things so that experience will be there. I'm going to move really quickly to the station. We'll talk about the guidance systems. The stations, permanent, iconic. You've heard those terms. Iconic means really two things. Number one, they're a reflection of the character of the neighborhood in which they're located and of Nashville. They're not just a bench with a telephone pole and a blue sign and a trash can. These are stations that are there permanently. They're attractive. They are very easy. You come out of Bridgestone after a concert, you're not from Nashville, and somebody says, catch the station, go down to the station and catch whatever we end up naming this, catch the vehicle, whatever it is. And if you go out 3 stops and get off, there's a cool restaurant. Well, you don't want to have to stop and say, now where is that station? Tell me exactly what. You need to walk out, there it is. And when you get off at one, gee, this is kind of cool. Go to your restaurant, come back. If you've had a couple glasses of wine, who cares? You're not driving. And you certainly want to be able to find the station. The public art, it's a tremendous opportunity for public art to be a part of the design. I don't think SEEB is, SEEB's right back here. SEEB Tuck is with Tuck Hinton Architecture. They're on the team doing the work on the project. Keep in mind, you don't have to have an architect on a transit system team. If you think, well, yes, you do. Well, my point was, Steve already said, yes, you do, because this is an architectural thing as well as a transportation thing. Okay? The final point on that, and then let's go to questions. The final point on the station, the second point beyond the iconic as a design feature, is they're permanent. Businesses, whether you're building apartments or condos or you want to attract more customers or you're willing to go up and put some investment, businesses find these systems to be very, very important, knowing that they're going to be there forever. Because that means there will always be a station. Just think of your favorite transit station in New York or in Los Angeles or in Chicago, wherever Miami, and know what goes on around the transit station. Transit-oriented development. That's a whole other topic, but it's attractive because it's in my interest to locate here because I can have people coming in my front door or residents renting my apartments or buying my condos that are not car dependent. I'll provide some parking, of course, but I've got a whole nother market now because this permanent station. So the stations, iconic and permanent, are extremely important. Final thing about the station is again the fare collection system. Getting people off and on quickly is important, and the last thing we want is somebody to be sitting there with the driver trying to figure out what kind of change I have or what kind of credit card do you take. This is all done in these systems and will be done in this system, all done on the station platform. So when you get on, there's no fare stuff going on at all. Now the old technology in subways is turnstiles. We're not looking at turnstiles. This will be a smart card or something where you may have nothing more than a smart card in your pocket that has an electronic record that you paid your fare. And maybe from time to time a random inspector will come by and tap you on the shoulder and say, can I see your card? That's what, if you've been to Portland and other cities, that's the enforcement that they will swear by up and down. They don't spend 10% to catch the 3% that are cheating. Doesn't work that way. They find a sweet spot balance, and therefore you pay your fare, you've got your ticket or you've got your smart card, you get on, and from time to time somebody may check, but customers that use transit are very, very supportive and pay their fares. So that'll be another part of the easiness of the trip. And hopefully your employer or your landlord or somebody has already paid your fare for you. So all you have is a card, and you get it automatically, and it's a smart card to use for everything else too. We might even talk the library into working a deal for library cards. Can you imagine that? Get your library card, swipe it, you can take MTA, the East-West Connector. Anyway, So I'm going to stop at that point so we have some time before we get run out of here. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. That decision, that'll be something the board will be wrestling with as we get closer to the implementation date. I think what I can say to you, if you're living in East Nashville and working at Vanderbilt today, and you're having to ride and transfer and ride, this will be less expensive, bar none, because of the fact that you at least won't have transfers. I think pricing policy will look at how much of the federal participation we were able to attract, and it'll just be our MTA, and I would say this if Jeff weren't right here, our MTA is one of the best run fiscally transit systems in the United States. And the reason it is that they make smart decisions trying to balance what the consumer will pay and what it takes to operate the system.
Do you know what some of the comparable prices are for, you know, other cities that are using this, like Cleveland and Portland you mentioned? I mean, I know just viewers are going to want to know about a price.
Yeah, I wish I could give you, I think the Cleveland, the health line from end to end is somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think it's about $3, something of that neighborhood. That's easy, you could easily probably just Google that and check it to make sure. But in that range, yeah. But then they get discounts. You get discounts if you buy a monthly pass. You get discounts if it's an employer-based system. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to bring that out-of-pocket expense to the customer down low. Yeah. And there's no doubt any of those fares, I can say this for sure, any of those fares are going to be less than you'd be paying for the car and the parking. Bar none. I mean, that's just without question. And especially if you're a two-car family, or a two-car unit, whatever you want to call it, and you say, with this available, I can get along with one car. Because once the fixed cost of that second car is out of the equation, it really is a bargain. Well, as you leave, think about that trip, or make up one. Here's the one I'll make up. Convention Center, is Terry still? Yeah, Terry's back here. Terry loves to quote the numbers. The average convention in the new Convention Center will be what, 7,500? A little over 7,000, and our current average in the old Convention Center is 30, about 3. You get the difference there, more than double. And it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and the sessions are over and you've been to Nashville, this is the first time. Then last night you went to the Honky Tonks and had a great time down on Lower Broadway. And tonight somebody's told you about some cool restaurants out around Vanderbilt. If this system is in place, it's a no-brainer. You can get there just as easily as you got to the Honky Tonks. Walk down, get on the Bridgestone station or whatever it's called. You know that it's coming. You can see it. There's an iconic station. You're cool with the way the fares are all set up in such a way that you just use your credit card, or it's easy to figure that out. And you don't have to, you just count stations. Go 4 stations and get off. And look for a place that's Italian or whatever you're looking for. And then coming back, the same thing. Think about that kind of convenience. The other piece that is much more, I think, regional in perspective, it's exciting as we look at regional mass transit, is the connectivity that this full corridor provides to people coming in to, whether it's a Titans game, whether it's to come downtown to work, whether it's to go to Baptist Hospital. If you think about all the regional trips that come in and out, and the parking and the traffic congestion problems because everybody has to get to that single spot they're going to, as compared to all I've got to do is get to the St. Thomas end, and anything up and down there I can do. And then I'll, at the end of the day, get my car and go home. And so there's a real interest in this. Somebody said once at one of our meetings, this is not only the main street of Nashville. This corridor, when you really think about it, in some ways is kind of a main street of Middle Tennessee in terms of the activity and the history and all of the things that it provides. And then the last thing I would say that I think I find exciting about it is I think it'll give a whole lot of us a picture that we can do it. And we did it. And I'm just waiting then for the people from Gallatin and Hendersonville to be knocking on Jeff's door and everybody else's door saying, when's it going to come to us? Because the dedicated lane technology works just as well. In fact, in some ways it's easier if you can dedicate lanes on an interstate or expand the interstate just a little bit or use the median of an interstate, if you think about it. It really, there's a lot of potential. Think Ellington Parkway. And so I think when this happens, it'd be classic Middle Tennessee. We took our time, we were careful, we were cautious, we didn't rush into something, and when we did it right, and now we can't get enough of it. And that's kind of the way Tennessee has done things. Yes, ma'am.
I just want
Go
to
get.
reinforce something you said is, I actually came from Hermitage to be at this meeting.
Ah.
And I was so glad to see on the diagram, you actually have basically park and ride
Yeah.
areas, so thank you.
Yeah. And the devil will be in the details. So we're working out where are those. And there are people that want park and ride, and there are people that said, not in my neighborhood. So we've got to figure out where the best locations are. But you came from Hermitage, see, you could jump on the Music City Star, jump on at Riverfront, and be on out here. Perfect. Okay. I think that must mean the time is... So unless you want to be on the book club of middle-aged theology, I think we're out of here. Thank you all very much.